So I can't wait to show you what I bought today. A 1968 Boston Whaler 13 Sport Interior with a 1968 Johnson Everrood 20 on it. So exciting. Pretty rough, but we're going to do a two-part series on restoring this to become a tender on a charter yacht. So stay tuned. So I found this 68 in Southwest Florida halfway through its renovation. Guy ran out of time. As you can see in the picture, pretty rough. The green you're seeing is the partial faired boat. You're seeing the original interior. Johnson outboard, a sport interior. So that's the two bench seats, a steering wheel, cable steering, which was half dismantled. We're going to do a full restoration. It's going to look totally different. So the first thing I did was I took an orbital sander. You can see on the bottom of the boat that it had largely been sanded. So with an orbital sander with a 80 grit, I went through most of the outside of the boat, which had been heavily faired. On the inside of the boat, I used a 80 grit or a 40 grit, depending on whether it had been sanded or not, and then worked my way down through 120 and 220. And it went pretty well. It came off pretty well. You can see me doing some additional fairing. I used Total Boat's Total Fair product. You mix the two products together. Super easy. It takes well and it cures really well. So time for a base coat, and in this case I'm doing, after vacuuming I took acetone, wiped down all the surface, and was really surprised with what I thought was clean was really not clean when I added the acetone. So it takes off everything immediately, dries almost immediately, preps the surface really well. Then it was time to paint. So I chose Interlux Epoxy Prime Coat. It was actually given to me with the purchase of the boat, widely available in most marine stores like West Marine and Boat Owners Warehouse. It is a two-part epoxy paint. You do need your respirator. It's pretty serious stuff. But I was really happy with the Interlux products. I actually used Bright Sides later in this video, but this went on really thick. It did fill a lot of the little small spider cracks that I was thinking might not get covered, and it did fill those. And so I chose to roll at first. You'll see later in the video I switched to spraying the top coats. Just so many nooks and crannies. I thought the spraying might be easier. We'll talk more about that in a few minutes. So after 3 coats of prime coat, I switched to bright side, and I had a big debate with myself and YouTube over using a 1 part or a 2 part paint. I also switched to an 8 gallon compressor, which I would say right is on the edge of being too small, and a pretty cheap Harbor Freight gun. And read a lot about it, watched a lot about it. I gotta tell you, I was very happy with it. The paint was very forgiving, and so if it went on a little thin or a little thick, it settled down super well, and it incredibly sped up the job. I was really happy that I sprayed this, and so plan is 3 coats of bright sides and little glazing correction between some of the coats. It really starts to show when it goes bright white where I missed a couple things or needed to sand a couple more things. And then we're on to hardware. Getting very close to painting the bottom of the boat. Just had some final sanding to do. It's looking pretty good. Let's take a look at it. Put some 40 grit on it so far over here. You can see some minor spider cracking, but nothing you can really get your fingers into. Did some light fairing on a couple of spots. You can see the areas where I have not sanded yet. That's what we're about to do. One area on the keel that I have done some more elaborate fairing on, but I believe we'll be painting this boat in just a little bit. Stay tuned. sanded, cleaned with soap. Gonna let it dry for a second. Again, all this stuff is very surface level, so can't even get a fingernail on there. I think that's all gonna get covered up. We'll see. Acetone next, just letting it dry for a second. And we should have a white boat in just a bit. Little refill on the paint. Very happy with my cheap paint gun setup. About half painted, coat 1, probably 3 coats. And keep going. Alright, the first full bottom coat on. You can probably see we've got some spider cracks still. But what I found is the second coat will really cover that stuff. If it doesn't, we'll put some 3M glazing compound on there. But certainly, stepping back, I mean, it's looking good. It's obviously a light coat. So the next coat's going to really get it covered. I did not prime this. I thought the bottom was reasonably, well painted, so did not prime it. I did prime the sides and the back and the top, so we'll see how it all blends together, but I think we're going to be good. We are getting very close to being done with painting. Just done the back of, or the bottom rather, of the boat, and still using the HVLP sprayer. Pretty happy with this thing. I've been rotating between a Harbor Freight version and this guy, which I bought on Amazon. I think I've told you already that I added the regulator gauge and a water filter. I got like 40 bucks into that thing, maybe, spraying it with an 8-gallon compressor, which is probably right on the edge. Really happy with how the engine cowling is coming out. This is a wet second coat. The paint goes on a little bubbly, maybe is the right word, but I'll tell you, it settles out really nicely. And really smooth coat, very little sanding between. Just did a little touch-up sanding with a 320. And then just put probably the third coat on the boat. I think I'm going to be done at this one. Looks really good, looks really smooth. Still a little bit, I don't know if you can see that. The paint tends to spread out and fill in some of these holes as it dries, so there were a bunch right here. But they're gone. Again, they're not even fingernail cracks, and so I'm not worried about, whether they are compromised, but just sort of the appearance at this point. But I think I'm going to be done. May hit this spot once more, then we're going to flip it over, and we're going to be getting really close to working on the interior.